Good evening. Welcome to the Gateway
Evening.
House weekly webcast. This is episode 12. My name is Manjeet Kripalani. I'm the executive director of Gateway House. This evening, we are going to be discussing the most exciting geopolitical topic of this decade and maybe even of this century, and it is decoupling from China. We have with us Amit Bhandari, who is our Energy and Environment Fellow, and Blaise Fernandes, our Director. Both of them have jointly written a path-breaking paper and done a study on China's virtual economy in India and its investments. We have had the drumbeat of decoupling from China has been growing deeper, faster, louder with every minute. So today the Indian government has had some news. They are going to be raising some tariffs on Chinese products. Also, Masayoshi Son of SoftBank has resigned from the Alibaba board, and Jack Ma of Alibaba has resigned from the SoftBank board. Mike Pompeo made a statement recently that the US, Europe are all going to be moving away from Huawei and 5G. You can see these from European Parliament statements. The European Parliament has also been talking about sanctioning China with the way it's been behaving with Hong Kong. And most importantly, last month, about a month ago, the US has passed the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act, May 20th. And this says there is no listing of any company unless it complies with the Public Company Accounting Oversight local audit for 3 years. There are 247 Chinese companies listed on the US exchange, and they have a market cap of 1.6 billion. There are so many Chinese apps in India that under normal circumstances, they could very easily have listed on the Indian exchanges. So I'm going to start asking questions to our two experts. We'll talk generally about Chinese products, and we will then move really onto the virtual products that China has been dominating the world with. So my first question is going to be to Amit. Amit, is there a possibility of a trade boycott, hard goods, virtual goods, in the tech and the new economy? Is it going to be damaging to China, more damaging than the boycott of physical products? And will it also, particularly given the fact that China has made such inroads into India and around the world, is it going to be harming the countries that have the Chinese products or China more?
Well, Manjeet, as you said it, there are physical goods and there are virtual goods. Now, ideally, an economic boycott should be such that it has a disproportionate impact on the other side. So rather than stopping the purchase of, say, plastic toys or drug APIs from China, we should be aiming for higher value industries, and this is where the tech and the virtual sector comes in. Secondly, rather than disrupting the existing supply chains, which will also cause damage on this side, we should try to disrupt the future supply chains, which have not yet been formed and which will have greater value. Now, what are these future supply chains going to be? The two most valuable Chinese companies today, worth more than the state-owned oil companies, state-owned banks of China, are Alibaba and Tencent. Both of them individually have a market capitalization of over $600 billion. And both of these companies want a share of the Indian online marketplace, which will be one of the biggest in the world. So if it is possible to block them or reduce their access, it will affect the long-term value and prospects of China's internet giants without imposing similar costs on India.
Because India is such a big market for these Chinese apps, which brings me to Blaise. Blaise, tell us a little bit about the app economy and why is it so valuable? Why is the Indian app economy so valuable to China?
Manjeet, as Amit very rightly pointed out, the BAT companies, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, are part of the digital Silk Route of China. India has a captive 800 million audience. Any app in the world will want to have a share of the Indian market. Any disruption in the Indian market is going to have valuations, an impact on the valuations of these companies who are all trying to list on the global bourses. So anything that India does to the app economy of these three companies will have ramifications in their valuations across the world. There are many kinds of apps, Manjeet. I think the first thing you've got to make sure is which apps should be blocked and which apps shouldn't block. And these are apps which are going to give us leverage with China. There are the apps which have economic utility. Blocking them is going to cost us economic activity, slowdowns, loss of jobs. I'm not saying we should give them a free run. We should ring fence ourselves and ensure that there's absolute security. The second type of apps are the vanity apps. If these apps vanish from India, our daily lives are not going to be impacted. Our economic activity is not going to be impacted. But if they vanish from India, their valuation of the global bourses are going to be very, very painful for the bad company. So that's big leverage that India has. The third type of apps are the apps that people are using for a nuisance value that can create disharmony, that can create misinformation. The government is well within its right to use Section 69A of the IT Act 2000, or even WTA today has provisions to block such economic activities if there are border skirmishes. That's the third type of app. The fourth type of app is the apps that the Chinese governments are making investments in, which can be used for propaganda in the long run. These are entertainment and news apps. Manjeet, on the subject of decoupling, I think the fight for this decade is going to be 5G. We read this morning, those plates are changing. We read this morning, Singapore has gone with Ericsson and Nokia as a service provider. The UK is re-looking at the various service providers that are available, the options available. And I think if India can India's got big leverage. This is a big telecom market. It's an important telecom market. And if India can use the 5G technology vendor service provider as a leverage, I think we can probably drive a hard bargain on any front for the Chinese.
But there are other, exactly. So there's Nokia, and there are competitors to
Absolutely.
There are competitors to Huawei. And Nokia has been in India for a long time. Ericsson has been there for a long time. They've been part of our telecom playouts. So it's been interesting, Blaise, that we've seen a huge investment by all the American social media companies, Facebook, etc. And we haven't seen a big play for India by the telecom companies. Do you think we're going to see them? You've got Google, Amazon, the e-commerce guys all teaming up with our telecom guys, but we haven't had the telecom companies make a big play.
Manjeet, the telecom companies, I think our own telecom sector is going through its own kind of midlife crisis. There's consolidation, and there are a number of issues. But I think once those issues settle and the market is clear that we're going to have 3 or 4 dominant players, you're going to have the Western companies make a play for the telecom sector in India. But I think India's got big leverage in terms of decoupling to play the telecom card and the app card in our negotiations with the Chinese. It will give us good leverage.
Yeah. Can you tell me, Blaise, just the specific apps you think that should be targeted and the grounds on which they can be targeted? I know you talked about it a little bit, but tell us, for instance, which are the apps that we shouldn't worry about and that take us through our daily life, and the ones we shouldn't? And are we separating the apps from the investments?
So we're not separating the apps from the investments. Every app is an investment. Every app in India leads to a better valuation of the global bourses. That's the constant. There are apps which are payment apps. Now, the payment apps have call centers in India. They have employment generation in India. They have investments in payment apps. We've got to ring fence them and ensure that they are secure, the data is secure. The government has to take active role in ensuring that these apps are ring fenced, and security is crucial to us. The second type of apps are apps which are, the mischievous apps or the vanity apps that can kind of cause, mayhem, borders, misinformation, rumors, playing one sectarian violence. Those are the apps that the government can ban immediately under Section 69A. The third kind of apps are the apps where the Chinese government, the Chinese companies, and I say Chinese companies because there's very little differentiation between Chinese companies and the government, where they've invested in news, music, and
so like Daily Hunt.
Yeah, so those are the apps which tomorrow can be used for propaganda. On the
Right.
subject of propaganda, I think 2 days ago, the United States government has acknowledged that a number of the Chinese television stations, daily, People's Daily, etc., they've classified them as Chinese propaganda machines and as not as media companies. So I'm just giving you an example. That's the third kind of app that needs to be looked at. And then I said there are vanity apps. For example, TikTok is a vanity app. If TikTok is not there in India, it's not going to affect our day-to-day lives or our economic activity, but certainly it can have an impact on the TikTok valuation, because 30% of the users of TikTok are based in India, and 10% of their revenues come from India. So those are the levers that the Chinese we have against the Chinese.
Okay. So Amit, I'm going to talk to you a little. I'm going to talk about China, Hong Kong a little bit. The Chinese government has been saying that it's okay if the Chinese companies delist from the US exchanges, but they will now start listing on the Hong Kong exchange. And it seems that China has prepared itself it's prepared Hong Kong with all the new rules and the security rules they've instituted in Hong Kong, to prepare Hong Kong to be able to accept all the listings of the Chinese technology companies. They are now trying to project Hong Kong as being the great center of Chinese technology listings. Is that going to be real? Amit, do you want to take that first, and then Blaise, you can talk about it?
Yeah. Manjeet, I would think that given the recent events in Hong Kong, Hong Kong is being more closely integrated with China, and they have essentially given they have done away with the one country, two systems rule, which they had actually said they will follow up to 2047. So Hong Kong has only a few minor differences compared to the Shanghai Stock Exchange. I mean, if you're listing something in Hong Kong, how is it really different from being listed on the Shanghai Exchange? The problem with many of the Chinese companies is that their disclosure levels are fairly bad. I cannot rely on a lot of information I see on those companies. And I would like to go back to about 2015, when the Chinese market had suffered a massive crash, about 40 or 45%. At that time, companies voluntarily wrote to the regulators saying that they have violated some norm or the other, and that they be delisted for a number of days or a few weeks. As a result, there was a point of time when over 90% of the Chinese companies were delisted from the market, so that the index doesn't fall. Right. Short sellers would get calls from the party suggesting that in interests of their health and well-being, they do not sell. Okay. So will an investor be comfortable getting into an environment like that? I mean, if I'm investing in Hong Kong and I find that it is no different from Shanghai, will a global investor really be comfortable? So, the question comes in, that is China a safe jurisdiction for me to invest in? More importantly, to sell off when I want to. If I can't do that, it's not a safe place.
Right. So it's the yes.
Manjeet,
yes, please.
Whether you list in America, whether you list in the NYSE, Nasdaq, Hong Kong, Shanghai, London, at the end of the day, a global investor is looking at earnings per share. And if the earnings per share is impacted based on the activity in India, the impact is going to be the same whether you list in China or you list in Hong Kong.
Right. So what you're saying is that India is actually, instead of being in a weak position, we're actually in a position of strength because our market is so huge and we need to leverage our market.
Absolutely.
Okay. So there has been news, even though we've watched it on TV, boycott China products. So two things. Actually, the boycott of Chinese products is starting to happen at a very, very low, very, very basic level. There are the small, tiny chambers of commerce in places like Nasik and, really the small towns that have been listing item-wise all the imports from China and saying that they are going to find substitutes in India. This has been, when you have the very small guys who are dependent on China for their livelihood saying, no, we will not do it, that shows a change. Is that real or is it not? Amit, would you like to take that?
Well, I mean, the sentiment against China, given the recent events, is actually quite real. And it is not just the one incident at the border. I would say that there has been a whole series of events which has been going on for a while. So for example, we have this whole problem that is going on with Nepal right now, which is making territorial claims. There is also a lot of anger amongst a lot, amongst a lot of people about the whole COVID-19 outbreak, which because of the initial cover up in China has become much worse, and it has actually been a major disruption to our lives. So when you combine all of these factors, it is clear to various people that China is not a reliable partner really.
Right.
So once that judgment has come in, once that bridge has been crossed, that China is not really a very reliable partner, then from there getting to a boycott and trying to find alternatives to China starts becoming a feasible option. For example, nobody says that boycott Facebook or don't use Google. It is only being used for Chinese apps and Chinese products at this point of time.
Right. Blaise, would you like to take that, or can we
yeah,
move on?
Manjeet, I think, at the end of the day, this boycott Chinese products made great 9 o'clock news value as well as Twitter handles and Facebook handles. But I think at the end of the day, the consumer is smart enough, the shopkeeper is smart enough, who will sell you what is selling fast. Okay. At the end of the day, for us to we have to find alternatives to our supply chain. If we cannot find alternatives to the supply chains, I mean, this is going to be rhetoric. And we will have leverage on the digital front, but on the physical front, unless and until we have a good supply chain of cheaper goods coming from somewhere else, or us manufacturing it, it's not going to have so much of an impact. But Manjeet, talking on media and apps, one thing on decoupling that I'd like to bring to the table. We're very proud that our Indian media, the mainstream papers and the English newspapers, the mainstream media and national television gives our Chinese diplomats, Chinese scholars, prime time in terms of interviews, op-eds, etc., etc., etc. And I'm very proud of that, because at the end of the day, we're an open society, freedom of speech. But I think it's also time for us to think how many of our scholars and how many of our diplomats who speak fluent Mandarin actually get a chance to so decoupling has to happen at various levels, and I think it's time that Indian media, the news, the IPF, which represents all the news channels, and the Editors Guild of India takes into consideration that we are not getting a chance to voice our opinion in China. So why should they be given prime positions in terms of op-eds as well as prime time interviews? And I think that's also part of the decoupling.
Well, that's spoken like not quite like a Democrat, but you're right. They
all's fair in love and war.
All's fair in love and war. That's true. So I do have a question though. The government has recently made a statement saying that all products on e-commerce sites should be designated. They should have the origin of the country where they are made or where they're headquartered written on the website. This is hard to do, but increasingly everybody wants to be able to have that choice, so they know what they're buying. And this is going to be easier said than done, but it's a big move. The United States hasn't done it yet, so India is really the first country that is making this move. And they'll have it just like they do with all kinds of products, vegetarian, non-vegetarian, etc. So I think that seems to be a good move. I'm going to move over to Amit for a second. Amit, one of the things that India has been doing a lot, the world is moving towards electric vehicles. It's a great, it's the new thing. Everybody ought to do it. But the problem is that all the elements that are necessary for the batteries come from China. 70% of rare earth minerals come from China, and those are necessary for batteries. How are we going to get around that? And how are we going to meet our climate change goals?
So actually, Manjeet, electric vehicles in case of India are actually, if I may use the term, a fake solution. Electric vehicles run on electricity. 75% of India's electricity comes from coal. So if we move over to EVs, we are actually moving over from oil to coal, one. Secondly, oil prices are actually at a very moderate level and are likely to stay there for a while. And more importantly, we only look at the oil import bill. Why don't we also look at the 8 million Indians who are working in the Gulf and who actually make India the biggest recipient of inward remittances? So if we move from oil to EVs, we are actually hurting that economy, one. Secondly, as you mentioned rightly, China controls about 75% of the global rare earth production. And China has used this monopoly as a trade weapon in the past. In 2010, when China had a maritime dispute with Japan, rare earth shipments to Japan suddenly halted for several months. Now, auto industry is one of the biggest manufacturing sectors in India. It is a large employer. It is a key cog to the economy. Do we want a key sector of the Indian economy to be dependent upon China's goodwill, really? And this monopoly is one of the reasons why China is pushing for EVs, and it has identified the EV industry as one of the focus areas, industries which it wants to dominate. So we should not be playing China's game. Blaise spoke about how it is difficult to decouple in case of physical products. If we go in for EVs in a big way, we are actually creating another center of dependence.
Right, right. So it's not just supply chains, it's actually new futuristic products. Just yes. This is sort of in the same league as the apps and the virtual economy. Right. One more thing, there is a decoupling from China, not just on, bilaterally with countries and with consumers and with companies, but it is also, we also need to be decoupled from China multilaterally. As you all know, the United Nations has 15 principal agencies, and there is a Chinese that is heading 4 of them. And if you do not include the WHO, if you include the WHO, which it controls, then 1/3 of the world's principal global governance multilaterals are led by China. This includes telecom, it includes food, and it includes obviously WIPO, which is patents, and it also includes health. So with China dominating the world, how are we going to decouple multilaterally from that? And even with the FATF, as you know, China has been the president of the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. And just yesterday, before it remitted its leadership of the FATF for the year, they gave Pakistan a present by saying that Pakistan still had to stay on the grey list of the FATF because it couldn't really work on its terrorist financing because of COVID. How are we going to decouple from that? Amit, and then Blaise, and then we'll open it up.
So Manjeet, I think the real option in this case, I mean, decoupling from multilaterals is not really an option because that will leave the field wide open to China. So in this case, we probably need to increase our diplomatic outreach to other countries to make sure that China is not able to game the multilateral system. We have seen how shamefully WHO acted during the COVID outbreak. Initially saying that travel restrictions are counterproductive and giving false information that virus doesn't spread from person to person. So a greater engagement means that China will not be able to game the WHO and other multilaterals like it has been doing for the last several years. And this is something which India cannot do on its own. This is something that will require a concerted effort from the democratic world. What we have seen happening in case of 5G, that also needs to be done in case of multilaterals. That is my view.
Blaise, would you like to add to that?
Manjeet, there's a vacuum because a lot of international players have abdicated their roles in these multilaterals. Let's move fast to a 5, 7, 10 trillion economy. So we have enough of chips in the bank to kind of sit on those tables. At the end of the day, it's all about the kind of contributions that you make. And the faster economic progress, the faster we'll have a bigger say in these multilaterals. So let's focus on our domestic economy and make sure that's a robust, moving fast towards 5 trillion, 7 and 10. And we'll probably we'll plug in that gap which has been abdicated by some of the global powers today.
Thank you all. Thank you, Blaise and Amit.